How's it going, YouTube? Coming in today with another video. Today I am live on Twitch doing a Learn the Rulings episode, and I do hope that you enjoyed today's video because the last video exploded, and that was super fun to do, and I'm really excited to be able to teach you all the new rulings that you need to know, and a lot of old rulings that still apply that you really have to know as well. So, without further ado, we're just going to talk about some sponsors here, and then hop right on into the video. If you haven't already checked out Imperium, Dragonshield, Gem, Cloud, RAW, or Grimoire, definitely go ahead and do so, all down below in the description. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed for some more wonderful rulings so you will win your next event, hopefully, and we'll just hop right on into the first ruling. So, this is a real situation that happened at an event, and I do not want this to happen to you, so please, 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 always make sure that you know that you can call a judge whenever something is sounding a little off, okay? The situation went as follows, and this was not me, this was another player. The Haggard Lizardos was summoned, and then on a new chain, the player declared Chainlink 1 Druis, Chainlink 2 Lizardos, because they thought Lizardos was an on-summon effect. It is an ignition effect, and that is not going to be something that happens on summon. So, the opponent told the player that they were locked into just using Lizardos because it was an ignition effect and they could not use the Druis even when the Druis was declared. This is a perfect example of a PE minor illegal activation. You illegally tried to activate Lizardos as if it was an on-summon effect when it is not. You did already declare the Druis because there's a misunderstanding in the game state. You can absolutely go back to the last legal action, which was you declaring the Druis Worm. This is something where if your opponent tries to force you into something that you know is just sounding completely fishy, call a judge. Immediately call a judge, because the judge will help you out. If you're still unsure with how the judge rules it, you can appeal to a head judge to get a better ruling on this. You are not forced into the words of your opponent. You're always able to call a judge. Please do this. I've heard too many instances of this kind of thing happening. You can call a judge. You can appeal that ruling if you're not happy with it. Call the judge. That's all I can say is call the judge. Now, let's talk about effects that do not just affect the game state. Cards that affect the player are cards that affect the materials. So there's two different rulings here that I want to go over. These are both something that has come up in the past. One in particular, of course, I know this because it's striker related. So, if your opponent uses evenly matched onto your end board of a couple set cards in a Shizuku, you will not be able to use the Ray Effect Engrave if you banish your Shizuku face down. Evenly match affects the player. You yourself banish cards off of your board. So that way, your Ray will never get its effect because it's not your opponent doing it. It's your opponent's card, but you're banishing your cards. So evenly affects the player. It's kind of like Mystic Mind. The player can attack, the player can activate cards. So very, very important to know that when things affect the player, it is not your opponent's effect anymore. It is your effect. When things affect the materials. So this is another really important ruling that's very relevant to right now. If the turn player that has a cross and a detonator gets their detonator lanced, and then you activate an effect and your opponent uses cross to detach from detonator, this is allowed because you're affecting the materials and it's not trying to affect the unaffected monster. Think about like a Goblin Biker versus a 8-mat Noir. You can still detach off the Noir even if the Noir is unaffected. So this is really important to know as well. Things that affect the material and things that affect the player are different than things that affect the game state. The next thing here is about location. Location is so important right now in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And you have to know this ruling because it's so good. So this is one of those things where if your opponent uses Hermetic Seal's effect to tribute to bounce a card, you can chain a DD Crow, a Bishul, a Keldo, whatever you have, to go ahead and move the seal out of the graveyard at cost. So they go cost tribute, and then you go effect to banish or get rid of it, right? At resolution of the return, the seal is no longer in the graveyard and cannot get the effect of summon from deck because it's no longer there. It doesn't even matter if you can see it in the banish pile. it's no longer in the same location as to where it was sent. So this is very similar to, like, let's say that you have Ray, right? You go activate Ray effect on board to treat itself for cost, and they activate Crescendo. Ray's already in graveyard. It's not going to get banished because the effect happened on field, and it's no longer on field to banish. It's already in a new location, so it will not get banished. Location is one of the biggest things right now because you can interrupt some crazy plays. Along with, like, normal summon Neptibus, dump Bodyguard for cost, chain DD Crow, banish Bodyguard. There will be no effect on resolution, and that's so important to know. Tier ruling. This is not just a tier ruling, but this is going to be very relevant for tier cards. So, this is called resolving as much as possible. So, if you read Rhino Heart says, if this card is sent to the grave by a card effect, you can special summon this card, and if you do, you can send a tier limit card. So, what's really important about this card is the first effect of the card says, you can special summon this card, and if you do. So, for the tier cache here, it's going to be very similar. This card says that you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, banish one. So, like, let's say that you have no legal target for a tier cache in your grave after you declare it. So, you had nothing in hand, and your opponent shuffles everything out of your grave. This card will resolve as much as possible because you already activated it when it was legal, so it will still summon, and you just won't have to banish anything. So this is going to be how this is ruled, because the Rhino Heart will actually send one out of your graveyard when it goes to reborn itself. So that's going to be really important too. So you're going to go chain link one Rhino Heart engraved to reborn itself, and then on resolution, you'll go ahead and send one from your hand if the summon goes through. So if you have another tier card engraved, let's say there's like a Solic, you'll go chain link one Rhino Heart, chain link 2 tier cache, and then to resolve the chain, you'll summon the tier cache, you'll banish the trap card, you'll summon the Rhino Heart, and now you have no legal target in hand to send for the Rhino Heart. That's okay, because it resolves as much as possible. It summons and then sends. So, since it already summoned, you no longer have to send. This applies into multiple scenarios, but again, this is one of those just read the card moments, right? Because as long as it says summon, then send, you're fine. If it said send, then summon, a lot of times you'll still have to send, right? So this is very similar to, like, Crimson Dragon. They'll go Crimson Dragon, target a card, and then you'll, like, get rid of the card that they're trying to target. On resolution, the Crimson Dragon has nothing to check the level of, and it will still go back to the extra deck because the first action of the card says return it to the extra deck. So that's another really important interaction as far as just resolving something as much as possible. So the Solemn Brigade has become very, very popular this format. Solemn Judgment, Solemn Strike. I'm always a fan of Solemn Scolding. I think that card's fantastic. It's really good. But one of the rulings that has come up, because this is the newer side of our rulings, we did get an update to our rulebook as of lately. In the TCG, there's no official database, which is really annoying, and we really hope one day we get one. So we base a lot of our rulings off the OCG, but there's still, like, a ton of precedents for different rulings that we already have. So let's say that you go ahead and you summon Sky Striker, Ace, Kagari, and your opponent flips Solemn Judgment. Well, Kagari is worded as you can only special summon one Kagari per turn. If your opponent judgments the summon of you summoning Kagari, you are allowed to go ahead and summon out another copy of Kagari because the summon never actually happened. Before, you were not able to, but with the update, you are. So that's another thing too that is really important. I think that's one thing that's kind of crazy. A lot of people don't know those rulings yet. And I do want to make a last little note on this too, because we're going to be making more ruling videos going forward. If there is a ruling that you are unsure about, please comment it down below and we'll try to answer it in the next rulings video to make sure that everyone's aware. Or alternatively, if you have a favorite ruling that you think is absolutely absurd, definitely comment it down below and then we'll cover that as well. Because there's so many different things that I feel like can help people out when they go to events. This game is very complicated. It's not Pokemon. Like, there's not your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn. It's, I'm going to do this really complicated thing in my turn and a really complicated thing on your turn, right? So that's one thing that we all have to kind of come together and just really talk about rulings, because those are the things that really make an event go by a lot smoother if you know them. Same thing with cards that say they're unaffected by activated effects. So, like, let's say that you had a E-Pearly Noir and your opponent has a Mirror Jade, and then you pop the Mirror Jade will activate, is now going to be a resolved effect. So when you hit end phase, it will blow up Noir because it is no longer an activated effect. It is a resolved effect. So that way, in end phase, the Noir will blow up. And it's very similar to a lot of cards right now that say they're unaffected by the activated effects. Very rarely do we see cards right now that just say unaffected by other effects. That's going to be like a masterpiece, right? Whenever you tribute a monster and a spell, it's unaffected by monsters and spells. And, you know, there's even cooler rulings with that too. Like, back when we had Rongo, it was just unaffected. You could still Borrelsword target it to put it to defense. Even if it doesn't go to defense, Borrelsword can still attack twice because it had a legal target for its activation. So, rulings are a lot of fun. I appreciate you all. If you want to hear more about the crazy rulings that are in Yu-Gi-Oh!, definitely subscribe to the channel and check out all my socials down below. Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and Instagram. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.